Boa tarde a todos. Good afternoon. Queremos dar início à próxima sessão de conferências. We are going to now begin the afternoon session of conferences. E queremos chamar aqui à mesa Lee McBride, do Colégio Worcester. And we want to call Lee McBride for his conference on chaos, radical empiricism and chaos. Empiricismo radical e caos.
Check, check, check. All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to give this lecture. I wanted to make a few quick notes. Now it's going. Okay. Good. Good. All right. Well, I would like to thank a few people. I would first like to thank Dr. Ivo Assad Ibri and Dr. Eloisa Bortolotto Gysi for the work and care that it takes to organize an international conference of this quality. Bravo. Moving forward. Excellent. As the president of the Society for the Advancement of American Philosophy, or SAAP, I would love to reinforce these connections and increase our means of interaction. To that end, please reach out and, if possible, consider attending the 2026 SAAP meeting, which will be held on the campus of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. That's Las Vegas. March 12th through 14th, 2026. So the title of this talk is Radical Empiricism and Chaos. I recently read Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari's What is Philosophy? To my surprise, I found portions of Deleuze's transcendental empiricism to be strikingly familiar to William James's radical empiricism. Both James and Deleuze make reference to an enveloping chaos, a roaring stream of sensory experience. Deleuze and Guattari assert that idiosyncratic or odd thinkers and artists iteratively leap back into the abyss or chaos, only to emerge with concepts in renewed vitality. Rereading James in light of Deleuze helped me to make connections that I had not made in the past. This paper, in part, is my attempt to connect the dots, to draw out implications. In the first section, I focus on James's conceptions of radical empiricism and pure experience. In the second section, I offer a Jamesian account of the way human beings weave order out of chaos. In the third section, I turn to Deleuze and Guattari to discuss chaos, planes of eminence, and the return to chaos. Ultimately, I mean to suggest that Deleuze and Guattari's interpretation of this returning to chaos or pure experience as a creative act or an opportunity to steal new concepts new variables, new harmonics from the murky depths of the abyss. I think this is conceptually fruitful. So, section 1. In Pragmatism, William James offers a description of the pressing philosophical dilemma of the early 20th century. One had to choose rationalism or empiricism. Rationalism is a philosophical view that seeks to establish knowledge in a rational cognition, ultimately justifying its claims a priori, or by reason alone. Rationalists seek a truth beyond our mutable vital experience. The rationalist seeks a truth that is one, absolute, and invariable, and thus turns from fluid and dynamic experience to abstract conceptual analysis and a priori justification. In contrast, empiricism is a philosophical view that seeks to establish knowledge in sensory experience, rationally justifying its claims through empirical evidence and experiment. The empiricist seeks the truth in concrete context, paying close attention to facts and the available evidence, and thus limiting their claims to correlation and corrigibility. Rationalism, when taken to its extremes, trades in arid abstractions, essences, and necessary and sufficient conditions. It often focuses on truths and real objects beyond the phenomenal realm, beyond mutable human experiences. Rationalism, thus, offers armchair speculation, abstract analysis, necessary logical inferences, religiosity, free will, and a monistic world. Empiricism, when taken to its extremes, reduces the world to observable reactions, evidential reasoning, and high correlation. It often denigrates the significance of human intention, provincial values, and religious presuppositions. With empiricism, then, we get reductive positivism, observable phenomena, material interactions, and probable inductive inferences, irreligiosity, determinism, and a pluralistic world. Now, James recognizes goods on in each camp. Empiricism keeps us in close connection with concrete personal experiences. It keeps us intimately tied to the buzzing vitality of facts, recognizing nuance, anomaly, and pluralism. Rationalism offers us an escape from the coarseness and perplexity of our corporeal existence. It offers intellectual abstraction, guiding principles, and orienting vision or religiousness. He notes, most of us have a hankering for the good things on both sides of the line. To bridge this gap, William James advocates a radical empiricism, a fallible and pluralistic empiricism that retains both the murkiness and efficacy of the street and a genuine appreciation for intellectual abstraction, valid inferences, and orienting visions or religiousness. This pragmatic radical empiricism can remain religious like the rationalisms, but at the same time, like the empiricisms, it can preserve the richest intimacy with facts. Radical empiricism stands in opposition to the extreme reaches of rationalism and empiricism, both absolute idealism and positivism. It is empiricist in the sense that its investigations prioritize sensory experience. Its investigations are experimental and fallibilist. It's radical in the sense that its investigations include all sensory experiences, even those experiences involving non-empirically verifiable phenomena. This radical empiricism is pluralistic as opposed to monistic. James asserts prima facie that the world is a chaotic pluralism. We establish conceptual frameworks, and yet something is always other, outside, excluded from one's point of view. Our investigations are immanent, operating from within human experience. For the radical empiricist, the universe is wild, game-flavored as a hawk's wing. The plasticity, the crudity of experience remains an eternal element. There are real possibilities, real indeterminations, real crises and escapes, real gods, and a real moral life. James leaves the door open for investigation into events and phenomena not easily captured in verifiable empirical evidence. And thus, James advocates a radical form of empiricism that allows for inquiry into unsettled ideals, theoretical models, religious experiences, and unfounded faith. This radical empiricism rejects fatalist determinism. It is a position that defends the right of the individual to indulge his personal faith at his personal risk. Note well, all our scientific and philosophic ideas are altars to unknown gods. James, of course, complicates this picture. Empiricism is reconceived. While the British empiricists assumed that sense data came to the human conceptual apparatus as discrete sensations through distinct sense organs and required an active process of association, this radical empiricism begins with an undifferentiated immediacy, an overwhelming, all-enveloping stream of experience. Sensory experience envelops us. James postulates that there is only one primal stuff, one primal material out of which everything is composed. Pure experience is the name given to the materia prima of everything. It is the immediate flux of life which furnishes the material of our later reflection with its conceptual categories. James writes, quote, "The instant field of the present is experience in its pure state, plain, unqualified actuality, a simple that, as yet undifferentiated into thing and thought, only virtually classifiable as an objective fact or as someone's opinion about fact," end quote. Only newborn babies and people suffering extreme cognitive impairment may be assumed to encounter experience in its pure, undifferentiated state. As such, it is, quote, "full both of oneness and manyness, but in respects that don't appear, changing throughout, yet so confusedly that its phases interpenetrate and no points either of distinction or of identity can be caught," end quote. On this account, we begin with pure experience and the separation of this primal stuff into consciousness and content by way of addition. Here, the relations that connect experiences are recognized as being as real as anything else in the system. Thereby, we, or human beings, bring categories and distinctions to experience. By paying attention to sensory experiences, to patterns and salient regularities, conjunctive and disjunctive relations, we create conceptual frameworks that help us to maneuver successfully through the world. Some experiences of fire are obdurate, hard, or unyielding, regular. Those fires burn, they give off heat. Other experiences of fire, for example, a burning bush, are fleeting, ethereal. Those fires do not burn or give off heat, though in some cases they speak to us in a revelatory or hallucinatory state. Experiences of a campfire are corroborated and the relations made explicit. These types of experiences are externally real. Empirical evidence can be offered. Experiences of a burning bush, like that of the Old Testament, are subjective and the relations elusive. But according to James, if such experiences wake you in a cold sweat or compel you to reorient your worldview, those experiences could be called internally real, as in a real mirage, a real dream, or perhaps a real prophetic moment. The postulate of pure experience states, quote, nothing shall be admitted as fact except what can be experienced at some definite time by some experiment. And for every feature or fact ever so experienced, a definite place must be found somewhere in the final system of reality. In other words, everything real must be experienceable somewhere, and every kind of thing experienced must somewhere be real. End quote. Within these parameters, the radical empiricist is able to investigate various types of experience. Those experiences that affect us systematically, objectively, and those experiences that may occur internally, subjectively, with very little extrinsically to investigate. As a brief aside, I will mention that the pragmatic method also bears a similar postulate, which states that there is no difference of truth that doesn't make a difference of fact somewhere. And thus the pragmatic method seeks to determine the meaning of all the differences of opinion by making the discussion hinge as soon as possible upon some practical or particular issue. Okay. Section 2, weaving order from chaos. So real quick, Charlene Haddock-Siegfried was my dissertation advisor. Siegfried describes pragmatism as a philosophy that stresses the continuity of theory and praxis, a philosophy that prioritizes experience and the ongoing transaction of organism and environment. For the pragmatist, human perception is directed by selective interest, and knowledge creation is thus guided by the interests and values of communities of inquiry. Human understanding is depicted as experimental and historically contingent. The conventional conception of truth is attenuated, recast as working truth or warranted assertability, context-based and always subject to further revision. On this view, a limited realism is entertained while preserving a healthy fallibilism about knowledge claims. The view does not hide the holes and blemishes in our worldview. It retains the anomalies, the quirks, and that which remains elusive. Again, the world is prima facie a chaotic pluralism. James writes, consciousness from our natal day is of a teeming multiplicity of objects and relations, and what we call simple sensations are results of discriminative attention pushed often to very high degree. Of course, through careful observation, conceptual distinctions, and abstraction, we establish conceptual frameworks. But the arbitrariness of the world as it appears resists all attempts at unification whereby a single principle or unified system. James asserts, there's no point of view from which the world can appear an absolute single fact. For the radical empiricist, the universe is emergent and still in the making. This view depicts experience as inherently malleable. By selective attention and partiality of interest, the perceiving knower imposes limitations and barriers, setting this as the focal point and that as the unit of measurement, emphasizing some relations and ignoring others. Thus, we as active and creative apprehenders contribute to the ordering of the perceptual flux. This allows that there may be multiple philosophical systems reducible to differing worldviews or aesthetics. This allows for pluralism. Importantly, perceptions differ from concepts. Percepts are in flux, and concepts are fixed and discrete. We, in our attentive and systematic moments, carve objects out of the original flux of sensations, pin them down, and name them as discrete concepts. We are then enabled to return to our perceptual flux, aided by our heuristics and compound conceptual schemes. James writes, we harness perceptual reality in concepts in order to drive it better to our ends. translating the perceptual flux of experience into concepts proffers three advantages. First, by conceptually mapping the relations between perceived entities or relations, we are enabled to organize the elements of things for our immediate and projected practical purposes. Second, these conceptual heuristics and leading principles enable us to revalue our perceptual life or reorient our behaviors according to new emphases. Third, these constructed conceptual frameworks can be reified and corroborated intersubjectively as principles or aesthetics, all ways of understanding lived experience. It is worth noting that this view draws into question our ability to approach or grasp an objective reality. All philosophical schemes are only interpretations of the full perceptual reality that invariably exceeds and overwhelms our cognitive faculties. Yet, Siegfried warns us of taking this concern too far. She warns us of reducing pragmatism to a hermeneutics of vocabularies and edifying conversation. Siegfried argues that Richard Rorty over-accentuates the deconstructive side of pragmatism, reducing pragmatism to mere linguistic analysis. To the contrary, Siegfried argues that achievement of our ends in view does not reduce to a mere manipulation of language. Experience rather than language is the central interpretive principle of pragmatism. Pragmatists take as their starting point lived experience. On this view, we organize experience by way of our cognitive or rational faculties, both aesthetically and practically. As forward-thinking human creatures, we bear an impulse for clarity and an impulse for simplicity. One impulse pushes us to distinguish and separate analytically. Another pushes us to consolidate and generalize synthetically. Faced with new phenomena, the impulse for clarity rips openings in our conceptual schemes, and the impulse for simplicity works to incorporate this new material into the coherent concatenation of beliefs. By such a process, we are capable of organizing or reorganizing our conceptual frameworks and thereby reconfiguring our lived experience. We find ourselves engaged in a continuous transactive process of interpretation, enactment, and re-evaluation. As such, we engage in weaving and reweaving our conceptual schemes, testing them against our environments. Both practical and aesthetic variables allow for new ways of envisioning the fabric, new tones, new patterns. Imaginative playfulness is thus an integral part of adjusting to the world. The transactive situation, the receptivity of and resistance of the social and environmental contexts we find ourselves in, places boundaries on this activity. As organisms seeking organization and equilibrium in a perilous world, some organizing schemes are better than others, given our concrete projects. Pragmatists thus are postmodern thinkers. They're anti-foundational and bear skepticism or incredulity. Skepticism's good enough. Toward totalizing narratives. But the pragmatist, radical empiricist need not follow the postmodernist or the neo-pragmatist in claiming that legitimation can only spring from each individual's own linguistic practice. For pragmatists, legitimating practices issue from the lived experiences of historically situated communities. And as radical empiricists, their claims or the consequences of holding particular claims can be investigated empirically and subjected to public scrutiny. The lack of absolute foundation for interpretations does not necessarily lead to anarchic relativism. Values and norms must be fabricated and codified because these control our behavior as well as guide our reasoning. In this tangled, perilous world, we must act upon our corrigible beliefs if we want a chance at shaping our future. We must engage in the interpretation and reinterpretation of our experience. We must weave chaos into order. Now the third section. Concatenated planes over chaos. Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, in What is Philosophy, articulate what they call a transcendental empiricism. This is, and that is strikingly similar to William James's radical empiricism. Deleuze and Guattari suggest that philosophy is a becoming other, a heterogenesis. They declare the task of philosophy when it creates concepts, entities, is always to extract an event from things and beings, always to give them a new event, space, time, matter, thought, the possible as events. Philosophy, then, is committed to the pursuit of that which transcends or lies outside what is. Deleuze and Guattari interpret the history of philosophy as the construction of consecutive planes of transcendence, where some object or subject is depicted as a purported foundation for thinking. Plane after plane arise. Ptolemaic cosmology is supplanted by Copernican heliocentric cosmology. Aristotelian teleology gives way to Cartesian mechanics, or mechanistic philosophy. On this account, a transcendent is never reached. Our conceptual plateaus remain immanent within the flux of life. When describing the transcendence of immediate experience, Deleuze describes three general moments. First, we begin with the immediacy of the dynamic present, undifferentiated chaos. Chaos represents that wild, overwhelming stream of experience that preceded any organized matter or system of relations. Second, from this flow of difference, certain organisms, objects, and relations are differentiated. This manifesting from the undifferentiated flux is a creation of transcendence, a world from the immanent flow of life. The organism gains its own opening to the world, conscious thinking. Third, we as conscious organisms erect conceptual systems that provide a plateau or a plane of immanence from which to think. Philosophy in this sense denotes an application of concepts, the building of conceptual systems in order to give order, consistency, and efficaciousness or power to chaos. Philosophy gives shape and order to the plane of immanence. It casts planes over the chaos. To be clear, the plane of immanence is not the ground or foundation of life. Rather, the plane of immanence is that conceptual scheme that allows us to perceive a world and simultaneously to think the outside, or that which is different from this milieu. Deleuze and Guattari explained that from time to time, idiosyncratic artists and philosophers are called to plunge back into the depths of sensory experience in order to release untapped sensibilities and potentialities. Here, ancient Greek mythology is evoked. Notice that chaos was considered a place outside the ordered cosmos. It is described as a vast void, a chasm, an abyss from which the known cosmos is created. In some stories, it is depicted as Tartarus, the deepest underworld where wicked souls go in death. The abyss in which the deposed titans are imprisoned. In other stories, Chaos represents the dark, shapeless space that bears all material elements in disordered motion. Harnessing this imagery, Deleuze and Guattari suggest that when our conceptual framework becomes riddled with doubt and ill effects, the poetic and idiosyncratic amongst us must leap into the abyss and struggle against the chaos, and return triumphantly from the land of the dead. The artist brings back from the chaos varieties that set up a being of sensation on a non-organic plane of composition that is able to restore the infinite. The philosopher brings back from the chaos variations that are still infinite but have become static and limited on the conventional surface of the plane of immanence. Here, I emphasize that Deleuze and Guattari are speaking metaphorically. We are not, in fact, traveling to the underworld, swimming across the Acheron, and confronting the Titans. The suggestion is that we leave our commonplace planes of eminence to return to a more primal sensory experience. By returning to immediate experience, we are exposed to the raw elements of sensation in all its buzzing, vibrant plasticity, and thus bombarded with novel perceptual experiences. We are compelled to hone new concepts, to recreate our conceptual frameworks. We are freed to continuously confront and transform our thinking, to build a plateau that transcends the conventional. I am suggesting that Deleuze and Guattari are describing something like James's radical empiricism. Deleuze's primal, undifferentiated chaos bears a striking resemblance to James's pure experience. On both accounts, each conceptual system proposed leaves an unclassified residuum. The history of philosophy represents a series of human conceptual constructions, immanent planes above pure experience, or chaos. Cosmologies have been supplanted. Paradigms have shifted. Idiosyncratic philosophers and artists iteratively return to that which lies outside the conventional conceptual system. They return to chaos. In this paper, I mean to advocate Deleuze's interpretation of this returning to chaos, pure experience, as a creative act or an opportunity to gather new percepts, new variables, new harmonics from the murky depths of the abyss. While we may not get back to pure, undifferentiated experience, the nuance and unnoticed variables we steal from immediate experience allow us to reorganize our conceptual frameworks, to weave order in a new way. From this comes newness, reorientation, vitality, new concepts that can be incorporated into revitalized, concatenated conceptual systems. Radical empiricism, in this sense, points to the buzzing vitality of immediate sensory experience, something primal, something that envelops and precedes our conceptual frameworks. William James points us back to pure experience, the instant field of the present. A simple that. Gilles Deleuze points us back to an indifferent material, a mixture, an indefinite representing multiplicity, a formless, ungrounded chaos. Both James and Deleuze maintain that there are experiences that outstrip conventional categories, boundaries, and conceptual frameworks. And, here and there, our conceptual frameworks fail us. We suddenly become confused and lose faith in the cognitive forms of the phenomenal world. In such cases, perhaps we should leap into the abyss, returning to the enveloping stream of experience. Thank you.
We want to thank Professor McBride for this brilliant conference. And do we have time to take questions? Or Is Professor Dilworth already on the call? We have a question from Professor Araújo.
Thank you, Professor McBride. I finally find out someone speaking about James in this Persian Ocean. It's a very interesting parallel between Deleuze and Guattari and James' radical empiricism. It's new, something new for me. And I think it's okay this parallel between pure experience and what you just presented, this idea of formless underground chaos, and James, the idea of the experience is undifferentiated. Well, it's okay. But I will call you Lee.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Please.
So my question is very simple. I have very difficult problems with microphones. I think they don't like me. I don't like them either. My question is, I think it's quite simple. To what extent can we assume this similarity as James radicalizes the basis of empiricism, and as a consequence, a radical consequence, it's that there is no open door to transcendence.
So thank you for the question. One of the things that I find interesting about these types of radical empiricism, and why I cast it as radical empiricism, is that it takes experience as this is where we start and this is all that we know, right? And as empiricists, that's what it's based on. We begin with this sort of thing as people in this flow, in this experience, and we can create conceptual patterns out of them. James is open to the fact that there might be something else out there. There might be divinity. There might be. But he always had this sort of like, we're not sure about that. And some people have experiences that we would call some sort of religious or transcendent experience. But James, as you, some of you know, said over and over again, I've never had one of those experiences, even though he wrote a book on religious experiences. And so I'm not certain that he can 100% ward off that there is no transcendent, but the philosophy that we're doing, we're going to begin with where we are in this experience, in this world. And that's where, as far as we know, this is where we're going. So that's the sort of response I have. And I think as far as trying to defend a philosophical position, this is one I would defend, definitely. That we begin in the world, in experience, and we can go to very heights. We can, build plateaus and plateaus and plateaus. But to say that you've reached the truth, or, absolute knowing or something, you have to be fallible, or at least that's the way that the radical empiricists, that's the way pragmatists have proceeded, and I would defend that view.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for an elegant, eloquent, and erudite talk. It was wonderful. I have some questions for James. You are his representative today.
All right.
Okay? Do we begin with pure experience, or do we begin with lived experience? Because they are not the same. Okay? So it seems to me we have to get to pure experience from lived experience, and we never can, in principle, get there. And so that seems an important point and it's confused in James, and please don't perpetuate the confusion. I don't think you did. But the second point is, are you at all troubled by the ideal of purity? And I say that because everybody thinks the color of purity is white, and it isn't. It isn't. The color of purity is red, because more blood has been spilt on the altar of purity than any other ideal. So when somebody says authenticity or purity, I get afraid, right? And so I think it's defensible, but I think it has to be appealed to warily, guardedly, qualifiedly. So I want to hear you on purity and the lived versus the pure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent questions. True story. I took these courses, at least one course with Charlene Ziegfried at Purdue, and it was all about the essays in radical experience and radical empiricism. Yes, and I remember thinking, why are we doing this? It's so metaphysical. It's so like we're trying to find what came first or what lies at the bottom of everything. And I just didn't understand someone who could write pragmatism and will to believe and all those the essays, that the same person was writing this material. And to be honest, I just sort of left a lot of that back there, grad school league. And having read Leonard Harris and Deleuze and Guattari has got me to understand that there is a way of reading pure experience as a postulation of what lies back there. Once we get away from our conceptual schemes, once we get away from certain ways of understanding the world, where do we go? And if that's what James is talking about, I think it makes a whole lot more sense. And it's a creative thing, right? So to answer your first question, I do think we begin as in lived experience. We're not conscious enough, typically, even as babies, to understand what's going on or to have a full recognition of the situation. So I put that in there on purpose, that it's a postulate. James was postulating what he thinks is back there.
Right, so it's not a datum.
Yeah, and so your second question, I do worry about purity, and I hate the word authenticity. I think we misuse it way too much. But I'm trying to go back to this literature. There's a whole book on radical empiricism where he waxes about pure experience. And I'm trying to offer, like, this is what he's doing. And, you know.
Yeah, you and I are in fundamental agreement. I think Dewey does a better job in Experience in Nature when he says that lived experience is always overlaid with interpretation, and we're never going to strip all of those interpretations away, right? I think he does it, but we can approximate a cultivated naivete by doing the kind of thing you're saying. But it's always purer, not as distorted, right? It's never pure.
I would concede, yes.
Hello. 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 Right. I was thinking about, first of all, don't know if I'm totally right, but I think that the first main author that came with these ideas, maybe Nietzsche, Zarathustra. I don't know, the idea of transcendence. I don't know if it's later than William James, but it says about the camel that bears the weight of living. Next step, the lion, aggressive, represents the ego, the dragon, the concept of society, and then the baby unipotent, I don't know how to say in English, onipotente, onisciente.
Self-propelling wheel, yeah.
Yes, then we got Freud that said the baby definitely is onipotente, onisciente. It sees the father as the extent of his own self, right? I was thinking about in the institutional and social psychology, we got Deleuze-Guattari that came with something similar, talking about transcend the institutional attack on our mind or on our spirit. I don't know if I can say it that way. And we need to transcend the institutions that are intertwined. They are the base of our society. So society tame our mind, our motivations, our ideals. So the four basic main institutional to create a society. Baden-Bleach from Argentina says it is family, the division of work, language, and family, right? The division of work, family, language, and religion. Yes, these four. I was thinking about the language. How do you see the transcendence? Nietzsche, Deleuze-Guattari, William James, when it comes to this institutional level, because in my opinion, Baden-Bleach says the fourth are the great, most important institutional to have a society, so a society to work, to be created. But the main, in my opinion, is the language, because we need the language to communicate with our people, right? So you transcend, you can see things from a different point of view. You can see how aggressive and how the institutional are attacking our mind. But when you cross the language, when it comes to language, how do we deal with it? How do we transcend language? How do we? It's a hard question. I was thinking about it.
Thank you so much. So I'm not certain that someone before Nietzsche hadn't talked about transcendence, but there are definite passages that I find in Nietzsche that are helpful in understanding transcendence in this sense, right? That it stays within lived experience. In Birth of Tragedy, and right as I was finishing, like the second to the last line, that's a quote from Nietzsche talking about the cases where we lose faith, our conceptual systems, our understanding of the world doesn't make sense, or it doesn't actually help us to understand our world as much as it should. And he talks about, at this point, something like going back to the oneness, the unity that you have with other beings. It's fascinating. So, I mean, there are passages there where he's talking like something that Deleuze and Guattari and James, I think, are talking about going back to some primal experience. And so if society becomes, and Nietzsche talks like this, right, a social straitjacket, and we actually need the social straitjacket to become calculatable creatures that can actually, follow rules and stuff, to use logic. There's a point where Nietzsche says we have to break free of the social straitjacket, and we have to give ourselves our own values and things of that sort. And that's transcendence again. And so I'm not certain about some of the other folks that you're referencing, but I think that there definitely are bits and pieces of Nietzsche that help with understanding this sort of thing. By the way, Deleuze is a scholar of Nietzsche, and so there's that going on there too. Yeah. Does that? get at some of what you were asking.
Yes, my question is about in the terms of transcendence. How do you see how the authors you're bringing see the relation of transcendent and language, the importance of language in our lives to give meanings to things, and then you are getting transcendence passing through language. How do is that the kind of a transcendent or not? What's the relation of being free, having a language, not having a language, our way to connect with the world, right? So I don't know. Like
So it is the case that languages have developed and changed over time, and new languages have actually been created. Yes? So if you study ancient Greek philosophy, you can see that actual words were created, new words were created, and new dialects of Greek continued to be created. Right? And so the Bible was written in a different type of Greek than the Greek that was written with Aristotle. And so new concepts are created, new formats, new ways of putting things together as concepts and words have changed over time. And so we can transcend our language now, right? Just as I'm sure in medieval times when people were speaking certain types of Portuguese or English, it's not the same today. We can transcend what used to be to the way that we speak now. And whatever we say now, we could also change in the future. And if you're asking me how, I don't know. But that's going to be a cultural thing. But that's the best answer I can give you, I think.
okay, thank you.
Infelizmente, nós não podemos aceitar mais perguntas agora, mas vamos agradecer ao professor. Let's thank Professor McBride. We can't have any more questions. And now we will proceed to the conference of Professor Dilworth, who is joining us. Agora vamos receber a conferência do professor Dilworth, que vai se juntar a nós virtualmente. Temos um pequeno intervalo agora. Retornamos às 4h.